All right. So we're talking about core beliefs, holy curiosity, and self-compassion. I might have added before that negative core beliefs in particular, or negative thinking. We can think of this in different ways, and as I give some examples, you'll recognize pretty quickly, I think, the sort of thing, and you'll have come across this a number of times, I'm sure, in the context of your own spiritual direction. So things come up like, and this is the kind of thing in spiritual direction, as you're going along, and it's really a very good sign because it's getting into a pretty sensitive place in people's hearts. And if they have the courage to say some of these things, it's really a sign that you've developed some good rapport with the person. But our reactions to it can be not always helpful, and so that's part of what I want to get into in the time today. Things like, no one has my back, things never go my way, I'm a failure, I mess up everything I touch, I'll never get it right, I'm too old, I missed my chance, I'm unlovable. I just heard recently someone saying, I'm all alone, no one cares about me. Um, and all of these things flow over into God at different times too. God doesn't have my back. God doesn't care about me. God is upset with me. So it tends to, these things morph a bit into God images as well that we can end up struggling with. As I said, it's actually really good if somebody is actually saying some of these things to you in spiritual direction, because that's a sign that there's enough trust. Um, so these are sinful. So sin, I always like to keep sin in the category of things that are willed intentionally. And I'm always a little hesitant to use that word. It's a very powerful word, and there's can be some guilt and shame associated with that. That's not necessarily helpful. Certainly, it's lies. Lies that we believe also tends to include a certain kind of intentionality. So this is precisely the kind of thing that I want to get into, and we'll see how that develops. Thanks for using the chat window. Um, So where did these things come from? A lot of times these things get lodged in our hearts earlier in our lives. So that's why I want to be a little careful about sin and lies we have believed. Again, uh, we can understand those things in the right way, but you know, as a child, when we don't know what's happening to us, we find stories to tell ourselves that try to make sense out of things that really don't make sense. So maybe a child who's in the midst of parents getting divorced starts to tell themselves a story about why this is happening. So what's happening is something that's wrong. There's an injustice and evil in the broad sense of it. A child should not be born into a family where the parents get divorced, and the child feels the pain of that. The child is always the innocent victim of this kind of thing. And so, but then how does the child come to understand that? And then we start to tell ourselves story, maybe I'm unlucky, which turns into nothing ever goes my way. So when life starts to feel chaotic around me, I start to feel that negative feeling, and that thought starts to come out of me. Or it's my fault, or I wasn't enough reason for my parents to stay together. These are the kinds of things that we can tell ourselves. Um, or if we were a victim of bullying, perhaps as a child, well, I deserved it, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy of love. And these things can, again, start to lodge themselves. And so when we feel bullied by life, when we feel bullied by others, when we feel that kind of pain, these kinds of thoughts start to emerge from that experience. And as I said, if they're coming out in spiritual direction, um, that's a sign that the person is really being quite vulnerable to actually say these things, because the reality is we tend to know. So, and this is also where things, insights from internal family systems parts can be really helpful, because we could say, there's a part of me that feels, let me go back to the previous slide. There's a part of me that feels like I deserve it. There's a part of me that feels like I'm not good enough. Now, it may actually come out in spiritual direction as I deserved it. These are bad things are happening to me and it's all my fault. I'm not worthy of anyone's love. I can't even see how God would love me. And the person is really blended with a part of them that is presenting itself to us. Now, we might already begin to say, well, there's a part of you that feels like you don't deserve it. So separating out, it's not actually a faith statement from the whole person. And that's why I'm careful around saying these are sinful thoughts or lies that we believe, because there's a part of me that believes this. There's a part of me that doesn't believe this. There's a part of me that knows full well all the right answers. God loves everyone. He shows up for everyone. He provides for everyone. I'm loved. I'm chosen. I'm enough. We can sort of recite all those things. There's a part of us that can, but there's a part of us that is feeling the pain. And then some of these old stories start to emerge. So unhelpful solutions for us personally, first of all, and then I'll talk about spiritual direction, which is related to it. Pushing these things into the subconscious is not super helpful. We do that by denying that we have those thoughts. They're sort of pressing up and we're stuffing them down. We can try to hide them from everyone, especially the spiritual director. Not a good idea. We are only as sick as our secrets, is the Alcoholics Anonymous big book says. So we don't want to hide them. That's why I said it's already a good sign if the person is saying it to you. There's a lot of trust that comes forth in saying something, especially that we have an idea is contrary to our faith, or is we could come up with our own counterpoint to. Sometimes we think we can pray them away, and we do that in different ways. That's also where we have to be a little careful about good things like renouncing, but sometimes we can end up really suppressing by trying to renounce. And so there's a point of connection and healing that needs to happen, and then we can take some positive steps. We can talk a little bit more about that. And then sometimes we try harder to think positive. And again, there's a way of stuffing the negative thoughts and trying to will them away. And that's not real helpful. So it's also not helpful advice to give, and it's also not helpful to model for people in spiritual direction. But a better path is a holy curiosity. It's always useful to put holy there. You may know St. Bernard's 12 Steps of Pride, where he talks about an unholy curiosity. But we're talking about a holy curiosity, looking honestly at our thoughts and noticing them, first of all, is helpful. When I say noticing them, it's because sometimes we don't, and this can be a helpful thing in spiritual direction, even as somebody is feeling badly, or we're picking up on a kind of negative vibe. We get a real downcast, a sort of everything is going wrong for me kind of tone, but the person isn't actually saying that. So we may hear those kinds of things and then ask the question, what are those, what are you feeling right now? Can be a helpful question. And then what are those feelings saying to you? What kinds of thoughts are coming up? And that's a really useful question. What kinds of thoughts are coming up? And then, we have to create a safe enough environment that the person can really say, well, I really feel like I'm wasting your time. I'm not good enough to be here. I'm never going to get over this. And it takes a lot of courage to say those things. Those are coming from hurting places in us. And so we can ask ourselves also, why are these thoughts coming up? And that's a good question. And well, maybe it's because of something that happened earlier today. Maybe it's because of something that we just said. I was talking I was talking with some seminarians about the spiritual gifts, and the way that the presentation came out, what he was hearing is, because I was talking about how this is helpful for future priests to help their congregations to know what their gifts are. And what he was hearing is, you're not doing enough and you need to work harder, and you have all of this heavy burden and you'll never be a good priest. So what's happening there? What's he hearing? Where is that hitting him? These are the kinds of things that we want to get into. So we can regularly check on what we are thinking. So this is, again, a personal thing, in the shower, on the drive into work, folding the clothes, kneeling down to pray, a lot of different times in between things. We can just kind of check in. What's happening inside of me? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? And the more that we can do that without judgment, without being ready to condemn these kinds of thoughts, the more that we can just reflect on what's happening, it's a way of taking a step back from ourselves. Some of you know Father Timothy Gallagher, and I really love what he says about desolation. He says, when we can ask ourselves where the desolation is coming from, when we can have some curiosity about that, he says it's rather than myself in desolation, it's myself reflecting on myself in desolation. So there's a way we can kind of step back from it and just be curious about it. Where's that coming from? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? Where are those thoughts coming from? And this is a way that we can take every thought captive, to quote St. Paul from 2 Corinthians 10:5. And I love this, when I'm in a particular mode. So I tend not to have a lot of negative emotions. And so when one of them is coming up, I'm very interested in that. Like, ooh, here it is. I'm going to kind of catch it and see what is this? Where is it coming from? What is it saying to me? What's this connected to? Where did this start? I know I've had I just had an experience earlier today. I got an email that really bothered me, and I didn't have a chance to address it right away. And I noticed a little later in the day, I was like really bothered. I said, why am I so bothered? And that, if I had to put some words to it, it would be like, this is never going to work out. Everything is going wrong. You're not doing a good enough job. And then I was like, what is that? Oh, it came from that email. And then I had to think through the email. Why am I feeling these things about that? I was being challenged and criticized for something, and I was just really feeling that. So it's having that holy curiosity. Where are these feelings coming from? Where are the thoughts coming from? What is it saying to me now? And so this is a good thing for us to do. This is a good thing for us to encourage our directees to do. This is a good thing to model for them. And then we want to take that holy curiosity into compassion. So there's always a danger that when these things start to come up, then we have other parts of us that are ready to stuff them back down. And we have a kind of inner conflict. Sometimes we have a Catholic standard bearer that knows the right answers and tells us, stop feeling bad. It's not Christ-like. And we end up with that inner tension. It's not actually addressing why we're feeling bad and what those thoughts are, but it's attacking them. And there's a conflict there. Or sometimes we have an inner critic that starts to beat us up for feeling down. You shouldn't feel this way. This isn't right. It's you need to fix this. It's just going to get worse if you keep feeling this way. And we can end up telling ourselves this, beating ourselves up that way. Or sometimes we have a tough part that stands up. Stop whining and get over it. And we shame ourselves and beat ourselves up that way. So beating ourselves up or shaming ourselves for feeling shame. This is always a bad cycle because we're just going to end up feeling more shame from all of that. So in the context of spiritual direction, the kind of thing we're helping a directee to do is to open to, is for us to be open to all that is coming from the directee, and then to remain in an open and loving posture. Now, I have to say at this point, certain kinds of soundtracks do bother me. It sets off some of my own protectors when I feel like all you do is whine. I mean, like, why are you're just a font of negativity. Like, is that all that you have to offer? I'll have those kinds of feelings, and I have to really check myself, because I can also come up with a lot of holy responses to that about why, negativity is bad and there's a reason for hope and Jesus died for you and I have a lot of things there, not helpful. But when I can kind of take that, let some of that flow, and then ask a question like, what do you feel inside right now? And then let the person say whatever that is. And maybe it's, anger or rage, or, what's that feeling saying to you? I feel like a failure, like no one cares about me. I feel lousy. And then we can ask a question like, why do you think you might feel that way? And then maybe they can connect it with some sort of stimulus, what's happened there. If I don't hear from that person today, a part of me believes that means I'm a nobody, a loser, not worthy of their time. I was talking with somebody who's really had a hard struggle with dating and has really felt like he's made for marriage, and the fact that one thing fails after another, and he thinks, well, God hates me. I must have messed something up so badly that I'm not worthy of marriage. I'm not worthy of any woman's attention. I'm not worthy of, and of course that creates a negative feedback loop. There's no better way to never get married than to have that kind of negative self-image and that repeated feedback loop. But to get to what's under that, there's pain under there. There's something to understand of what's going on, and for us to be able to enter into that pain with that person is a real act of compassion. So our temptation is, that's irrational. God loves you. You shouldn't feel that way. If you were really Christian, you wouldn't feel that way. You know better. You should be thankful. We have those kinds of things that we can end up pushing at people, and that invalidates what they're feeling. It tells them to stop it, and it shoves it beneath the surface, and it never addresses it. And in fact, the directee probably is able to do that for themselves. In fact, for them to actually share with us what's happening is really a great act of, it probably means they've set aside some of their own standard bearer, inner critic, etc., in order to share that with us, because they know it's irrational. They often will know the right thing to say and what Jesus does and all of the other things. So it doesn't help to say it for them or at them. Having connected with them, though, when we can really see the hurt, when we can name it for them or help them to name it, when we can really connect, have a healthy attachment, connection to them, an attunement, an emotional support, when they feel and identify the negative thinking, share it, and feel empathy, then there's an openness and a strong connection. Now we're in a place that we're more able to speak truth into these places, when we're able to acknowledge, like, that's really hurt. You're really hurting. That was really hard. I don't know how you went through all of that. I can tell the pain that was there. I can tell the anger that you have. And I really appreciate you sharing that with me. So those kinds of things, said sincerely, I'm sort of rattling them off at the moment, but when we're able to enter into that and really connect, then we're in a better place to actually speak a word of encouragement, to speak truth. We're connected with a little part of them that's hurting and has these negative beliefs, these burdens that they're carrying. And then when we speak into that, sometimes we can speak on behalf of God, like, I know God is right there with you and really loves you. And that part of you that's really hurting and has been bullied and suffered from divorce and has never felt good about yourself and always felt like a failure, the Lord is just holding that part of you right now in his arms, close to his heart. So we can say those kinds of things because they're true. And we can help to apply that to the directee directly. Sometimes we can, because we are spiritual directors, our role is to be a mediator for God. We're sort of a sacramental presence of him. And so we can also at times, and that depends on the relationship a little bit and your comfort, but we can sort of speak that directly, like, I really see that little part of you, and I really love that little part of you that's really been hurting for so long. You've had those kinds of questions, they've lodged into your heart, but you are good and you are loved. And we're in this together, and we'll be able to get out of it. So you're really taking on God's part. And then you can reinforce that. And God is also seeing you in that way and loves you in that way. And he is with you, even when I can't be with you, etc. We can sort of build on that part once we've made that connection. And then as we start to connect into that place, we start to affirm the person, we start to see and acknowledge some of the pain and begin to encourage. Then a lot of times, and optimally, the directee himself or herself starts to emerge with true statements. I'm such a failure becomes, well, I'm not where I want to be yet, but each day I'm going to do my best to take the next step. And they may also add, and I know that God will be there to help me. I know that he's providing for me and he's with me. Sometimes a person has a hard time coming up with that. And a little way to reframe it and to help them is to, say, well, if you were with a little child who is hurting like this, or if you were with a friend who is going through this, what would you say to them? Sometimes that brings that part out of us that says, well, I would say, I know you're trying really hard and you're getting a little bit better, and I've seen a lot of progress. And I think it's just amazing how much you've come through. Again, if we can help the directee to say it, that's going to be the best thing rather than us providing the answers for them. Sometimes we can also help and begin to formulate that response or that truth. And we want to do it in a way that we're not shoving it on the directee, but rather offering it and letting the directee own it and take hold of it. Things like, I never get it right becomes, I've made mistakes. And I'm also a beautiful soul made in God's image. I know he sees me as I am, and he loves me unconditionally. I'll never be as good as other people becomes, no one can take my place. I have a unique place. I am uniquely loved. I have something unique to offer. Or I can't be loved becomes, I am precious in his sight. So this is the kind of transformation that, again, we can't kind of force. The best thing is to meet the person in the pain, give room for the feelings and thoughts to be expressed and looked at with curiosity and compassion. And then as we're able to bring those parts of us into relationship with someone who loves us, and spiritual direction can be so powerful that way, then we're in a better place to lead the person, or already the person will start to move in the direction of being open to truth and open to a different story to replace the one that they have told themselves for a long time. This is I garnered the flow of some of this from Alison Cook, who's really a great writer and has a lot of good things to offer. And so I just pulled this last bit from her one of her blogs, and I'll give you links to those blogs at the end here. But she points out, so when we're dealing and healing with healing negative thoughts, our job is to stay present to what you're thinking about. Again, there are ways that we try to shove that down. I'm not angry, I forgive. We do some spiritual bypassing and shove things down, push things away, deny that we're actually feeling these things. So the first thing is to stay present to our feelings and our thoughts, even if they're negative and difficult. God's job is to nudge us to stay present. He has a way of kind of holding us gently, bringing things up. Sometimes he allows certain situations so it can hit certain places in us to help these things come forth. He wants us to be free and to be healed. Our job is to observe negative thoughts and the stories that they tell us. So we observe them without judgment, holy curiosity. And then as we do that, God draws near to us with compassion. And then we notice shame we might be carrying. So shame is a feeling of unworthiness for connection. And so it has a way of separating us from relationships. And shame is a real barrier. So when we're carrying shame, the remedy is always to bring it into relationship. And so allowing God to draw close to our shame with his loving presence is a way that we can do that. Also, write negative or shaming thoughts down, I would say, and tell someone safe. So it's always good when we can bring these things into the context of human relationships. God is always preferring that. He always wants to mediate his love through other people. He said to Adam in the garden, it's not good for man to be alone. He didn't destine us to just be alone with him and figure it all out on our own. He made us to be with others, and for that way to mediate his presence to us. But God will help us to recognize lies that we've been believing as we write some of those things down and are honest about them, curious, compassionate. And then we learn to create an alternative story that maybe I'm a work in progress. I'm not a total failure. Maybe I am precious and unique. I'm not useless and terrible. So we can create an alternative story, and then God has a way of infusing grace and truth into the core of our being. So that's your job and God's job. And then our job as spiritual directors is really to model God for the directee. That's always what we're doing. We always want to provide as much as possible the way that God would respond to things for the directee. And so when we respond with a holy curiosity, it's kind of like God seeking out Adam in the garden. Adam, where are you? So it's a beautiful question. He doesn't start by attacking Adam. Why'd you do this wrong thing? You're terrible. You always mess everything up. You broke the whole thing. You ruined all my plans. So God says, where are you? And he draws it out of Adam. And so we do the same thing with that curiosity. And then we draw near with compassion, even as Adam, God in the garden again. So you ate of the tree of which you are not to eat. And then, so by modeling God's response, in other words, all of these things that God does, nudging the person to stay present, not shaming them for the negative emotion that just came up, drawing near to them with compassion. You're really hurting. I'm so sorry you're going through this. That's really hard for you. I'm here with you. Meeting their shame with our loving presence by being attentive and understanding, calm and open, helping to recognize the lies that they've been believing. Sounds like there's a part of you that thinks that you're not any good, or you feel really worthless, or nobody will care for you, or it's all your fault, or you mess everything up. So again, it's great if the directee can say as much of those things, have that experience of discovery, but sometimes we can offer that. Sounds like, would it be appropriate to say, or would it describe the feeling if I said, we always make it easy for the directee to freely embrace or freely correct or reappropriate, not, you're feeling worthless. You need to stop that. So that's not opening freedom. And then to infuse the healing truth into the core of the person's being. And that's where, as we make that connection with the person, then we can reinforce, you are really good. You're a real gift to me. I see your uniqueness, and I really love that about you. I understand how much it hurt to be ignored by that person, and I'm sorry about that. I see you differently than that. I really see your great value. So we can really, really reinforce that in the directee. In all of that, we end up reinforcing God's own response. On the other hand, if we shame, reject, suppress, renounce that, we can end up reinforcing God images that say that God is not comfortable with your negative emotions and wants you to stop them immediately. Now, I also want people to work through and heal from, but just pressing down and rejecting can be cause other pain. So instead of burying emotions or numbing them, we can learn how to understand and care for them by engaging in an emotional healing process. And even as we get to know our emotions and we get to understand where some of these negative thoughts come from, they can really become our allies. The painful emotions can become our allies as we start to, even the thoughts can help us to connect to the emotion. And then we can start to recognize loneliness is a cue to cultivate connection with others. Sorrow can help you slow down and make space for a healthy grief. Sorrow is a response to things that are wrong, uh, pains that we've borne, things that are not as they should be, injustices. And when people have suffered real problems, that's painful. I was interviewing a priest today, and he was telling me how beautifully his father responded to his vocation and how affirming that was. On the other hand, a lot of times people who are, having a call bring that up, and a father rejects or doesn't understand or puts it down, and the person feels real pain around that, and rightly so. A loving response from one's father is what ought to happen, and anything other than that is very painful. It's an evil in that sense. And so feeling sad about that is appropriate. It's a sign of you're in touch with the reality, which is wrong. This is a wrong feeling. So anyway, we can give people a space for that. Healed anger can be a helpful warning that we need to set some boundaries. We feel anger as a motion to overcome something that's wrong, and it can really pick up on boundaries that are being violated. And fear can help us to stay humble and connected in healthy ways to God and to others. So our emotional healing can really open up some beautiful places for us. So a few blogs, if you want to read about some of those things. I did all of the application to spiritual direction. She gives guidance for self awareness and self compassion processes, self-healing processes. But anyway, there's a lot of good material there to help us to cultivate some of these practices. Great. So comment about how helpful this is, and it is very much related to spiritual bypassing. And so Souls and Hearts, yeah, also sent out an email this week about spiritual bypassing. It's very very good. Really appreciate it. A lot of scenarios there that I've seen that kind of thing unfold. So any other questions that you want to type out and I can address, and then otherwise I'm happy to stop the recording, and we can just chat that way as well. I'll give you just a minute. I got to go get my power cord. I thought my battery was going to last, but it's going to die. So I'll give you a minute to type anything out you need. Okay, looks like we've exhausted all of the questions. Very good. So